In this video, I am putting the best TikTok art hacks to the test to find out which one comes out on top. Apparently, these art hacks will change your life. Let's find out. This video is sponsored by CapCut. More on that later in the video. Let's get straight to business, shall we? We're going to jump into a whole bunch of art hacks and I am going to be experiencing and doing them all to determine what is the best. We have some hacks by Super Ray Dizzle, who I trust to actually put out some good ideas.
I know this sounds weird, but if you have dirty graphite kneaded erasers, you can add a little bit of soap to them, wash it and dry it with a towel, and it literally cleans it like it's brand new.
Now that I didn't know and have never tried, so let's give it a go. I have a filthy kneadable eraser. Soapy. Do you just knead it in the water? I don't know how specifically to clean it, but it feels like it's disintegrating a little bit. Let's try it with a towel. Give it a little squeeze. Absorb the kneadable juices. Feels a little tender. Have I just ruined a kneadable eraser? I don't know. I'm gonna set this aside till tomorrow just to let it fully dry and we'll see if it still works and if it feels cleaner.
1 day later.
Looks to me like it's a perfectly normal kneadable eraser now. It really felt too soft before. The fact that you can put it in water and knead it and end up with a clean kneadable eraser is pretty cool. I did not know that. Points for the hack. Thanks, Ray. So this art hack is basically creating a homemade wet palette. Now, I've used wet palettes before, but I've bought wet palettes and they range somewhere between $40 to $100 depending on the brand. But I've never made a homemade wet palette, so let's make one now and see if it stands up to a normal wet palette. Basically, you want that sponge to be nice and damp. Then you can put baking paper on top. This creates a barrier between the sponge, and this is the wet palette. It keeps it wet while you're working, but the idea is you can pop the lid on, put it in a cupboard and come back to it tomorrow and you should be good to go. But let's make a homemade wet palette, mix the same colors, and we'll come back tomorrow and see if we can still work with the colors that we mixed. We have a paper towel in here that we want nice and damp. Pop our paint straight on. And as per the TikTok, I can, in theory, pop this in the fridge, come back tomorrow and pick up right where I left off. Greetings from the future. It's the next day. Let's start off by looking at the traditional wet palette that you can purchase. Have we retained the workability of our paint? It's a little bit runny and mixily, but I have learned over time that you don't fully close the lid. You actually want to leave it a little bit loose because what's happened is it sort of over-absorbed the water and it becomes a bit runny. It's quite watery and the colors have bled into each other, creating a less accurate mix. So you sort of have to remix it a little bit. But even the original colors are quite watery. Ooh, interesting. So immediately less watery. And I wonder if that's because the fridge has held everything in place more, because this one wasn't in the fridge. That's really interesting. However, working directly on paper towel is not ideal because if you're dipping and mixing and blah, 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 it will loosen up and the paper towel will sort of get gross over time. But let's test our paint, shall we? Look at our orange, pretty much exactly as it was, and our green, exactly as it was. Okay, I reckon you can make the most of wet palettes you purchase by maybe putting them in the fridge. And I reckon you can get the most out of your homemade wet palettes by creating a dividing layer between the sponge and the paint. Literally kitchen paper or baking paper will do the trick. I reckon that's a pretty good hack. The last of Ray's 3 art hacks in this TikTok is basically a paint squeezer. An art hack to save you money. Now I know it's satisfying to squeeze every drop of paint out of a paint tube, but is it actually going to save you money? Let's find out. But to test this art hack out scientifically and determine factually if it will save you money, and if so, how much, I've got this pretty much empty tube of cadmium red, which I could probably get a bit more out of, so I'm going to squeeze as much out of just by hand as I possibly can to determine what the state of the tube would be without any extra squeezing. And putting a container on a scale, I use a tube squeezer that I got from Amazon to get every last drop of paint out to see how much more I would have been missing. Now that's just part one of the experiment. The second part of the experiment is to do it from the very beginning. So I have two completely brand new tubes of paint that I'm going to run a bit more of a controlled experiment with, starting with the cobalt blue, squeezing out every last drop to see how much paint comes out and what it weighs. Then I can compare that to having squeezed a tube from the very beginning all the way up to the end of the tube. And as a result, I will be able to perfectly compare the weight measurements of both methods of using paint tubes to see if there is a substantial difference. So the first tube that was squeezed by hand got 79 grams of paint out of it, whereas the second tube, which used the squeezer to get more paint out of it, only weighed 78 grams in the end. But I spilled an undisclosed and unmeasurable amount of paint on myself, leading me to believe that this study is inconclusive. And the only conclusion we can draw is from the first experiment, where I squeezed out all of my red tube and got 10 extra grams of paint out, which I think is close enough. Let me just look at cleaning hacks. You know what? I'm enjoying this hack thing. I want to share a few hacks with you. The first is, if you want to clean your shirt really easy, you can with the magic of editing. Look at that. It's spotless, and you didn't see me deal with it. I'm going to show you a really cool actual art hack with hot glue with my third hack, CapCut, the sponsor of this video. CapCut is a new, easy-to-use video editing tool designed for multiple platform use, including Mac, PC, mobile, and even web. CapCut gives you a huge range of video editing functions, filters, audio and visual effects, while keeping it free of charge and ad-free. And you don't need to be a YouTuber with a studio and thousands of dollars of camera equipment. As you can see, I'm making my own art hack video using just my phone and a simple phone stand I jury-rigged out of a couple of bits and pieces I got from Amazon for about 10 bucks. And I can bring all of that over into CapCut and make my hot glue art hack to share on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. I filmed this one in vertical video, obviously, for those platforms, but I could just flip it the other way and make full YouTube videos using CapCut, and I could edit it on my phone or more comfortably on the PC or even on the go using the web version. Check it out today by using the link in the description. I filmed and edited the art hack into something complete that you can watch right now. This is what I made in CapCut. This is the ultimate hot glue terrain art hack. So usually when you make terrain, you mix up plaster of Paris and have to get the mix just right and then put it in these molds and wait for ages for it to dry. On top of that, after you wait ages for it to dry and you finally get it out, it's often really crumbly and hard to work with. I bet you didn't know you can use hot glue in the same rock molds to create individual molds in the same way that dry much faster. You can push it further into the mold by wetting your fingers and gently pushing along the back. And if you're in a huge rush, you can just submerge the whole thing in cold water and it will set super fast. Then just remove all the rock molds and you can even glue them together with hot glue. When you've got the rock piece you're happy with, it's just a matter of spray painting it with a primer, so then you can put other spray paints or just brush paint on top of it to create a dry brushed terrain rocky effect. It's super quick, really easy, and the result is flexible and durable. And that's why that art hack is now going to be something I can put up on TikTok or YouTube Shorts for you to enjoy, thanks to CapCut, which you can also check out and enjoy and make loads of content yourself to share with others for free and with a link in the description. Huge thank you to CapCut for sponsoring this video. Now that's a practical hack. Here's one where we're creating a final polished look on our artworks. This art hack looks like you basically put two canvases face to face, way down the corners with cans so you're not seen through to the sides or it's not lifting, and then you spray on the canvas, get to do the nice clean finishing. I have these two, I think they were timed challenges, Bob Ross pieces that we can test this with. You're leaving the confines of my laboratory. Laboratory? Laboratory. Do you say laboratory or laboratory? Dexter's laboratory? In Dexter's laboratory. Laboratory. I should know this, I'm a scientist. All right, so that art hack was using black spray paint. So we're gonna replicate it using black spray paint. Drop sheet! Because we're gonna make a mess. Please do this in a well-ventilated area. Weigh it down. See if this is worth doing. I actually have some old pieces where I painted the edges at the time of doing the creation. which as you can see, you know, it's not perfect. I've sort of gone over the front here. There's a few places that are a little bit patchy because I just did it in one coat. The edge is not super even. Yeah, look at that. We're going over the front edge. Is that solved with this art hack? So first things first, we can separate them from each other and reveal, ooh. Okay, so immediately the canvases, though they were purchased to be identical sizes, clearly were fractionally different sizes, which meant that I have some bleed over. Now, it doesn't look awful, but it's pretty stark when you've got this sort of soft environment and a harsh black line coming out into the front. It didn't happen with this one because this was the slightly bigger of the two. You also end up with some like artifacts of where the two touched, but where the spray didn't reach. But if that's not an issue, and if you can wait for your piece to be fully dry, I reckon putting this on a flat surface and giving it a matte black spray around the edges could be really good if you can avoid some of this stuff, which I think only happened because we did the whole canvas face-to-face thing. So I'm actually gonna call it a hack win with an asterisk. Terms and conditions apply. Let's move on. Our next art hack is apparently painting with tissues. So by squishing and pulpifying tissues, squish it out, put it in a bucket and mix paint in. So you create a colored pulp. And then when you have an outline, you just poke it onto your drawing. You might be able to do this on watercolor paper as well. Might sort of absorb it or hold it. And they fill it in with the goop, with the colored goop. I'm not sure what this hack is solving. Maybe it's like a budget impasto style of painting. Maybe it's just a unique way to achieve an interesting result. This showed the final like painting, but wet. So we need to test it. A, see if this medium works, and B, see what it looks like the next day when it's dry. So I set about to work dissolving and tearing apart and pulpifying tissue paper, which it turns out is a harder process than you think. I mean, it looks pretty straightforward and super easy, like it just all falls apart like, I don't know, pulled pork or something. But no, in person, I had to switch to warm water, hoping that that would dissolve it a bit better. I tried doing it all by hand, but just by squeezing it to try and pull it apart, it sort of compresses it and makes it harder to pull apart. I tried using scissors, which, you know, the bigger the clumps you get, apparently, the harder it is to cut through. This alone was a way more involved process than I expected, but I stayed the course and I did end up with pulp that I could then separate into a few containers and, like the video showed, add some paint and make a few mixes of pulpy paint. To put this into practice, I just drew a very simple flower to see if I could fill within the lines with our colorful compound and see if the process was pretty workable and if the result looked any good. Now, I find this whole thing a little bit baffling because there's no glue in this mix. It's just paint and pulpy tissue. Now, paint has a binding agent in it to make the pigment mix well with the suspension or the liquid that also helps it adhere to a canvas or a surface that you're painting onto. In this instance, we're diluting the binding power of the paint by mixing it with watery tissue, which means you have very little that's going to be holding whatever this is onto the surface that you're putting it on. My hypothesis is when this dries, it's just going to very easily crumble away from the surface, which is why in the batches that I mixed, I added a splodge of PVA glue to my blue so that separate from my little flower piece, I could put down a little controlled area of my own concoction, the same thing, just with a bit of PVA glue, just to see if it would at least hold well together when it dries. But when it dries, there's a whole nother issue. We need to see what this looks like tomorrow. So we set aside and we come back tomorrow. So one last time we come back to the future to my dry, textured impasto. I don't know what to call this. I think the result looks pretty cool. It's absorbed so much water into the paper that it's, you know, it's quite warpy. So I guess the surface you do it on matters. And it's not completely dry. That said, my concerns about it binding don't seem to have been an issue. It's stuck to the page pretty well, so the glue was not a necessary addition. This one kind of comes down to preference. Do you like the final outcome look enough to go through some of the tedium to get the result? I'm not sure this is a hack that solves anything, but it's a medium that's kind of cool. I'll give it a sure. So there we have it. After rigorous study, application, theories, research, and of course putting it all into practice, we've tried art hacks, and my conclusion is my two favorite, well, aren't any of those. I really liked my hot glue art hack, which was my art hack, and I'm just being selfish. And I really like the sponsor of this video, CapCut, for making that art hack and content possible. Wow, it's almost like I'm not actually a scientist. Clearly, I'm just an egomaniac posing as a scientist for your entertainment. Thank you for watching this video. In all seriousness, my favorite art hack of all of those is the paint twisty, the tube thing. I mean, you save 10 grams of paint, but also it's way neater and more satisfying. The rest were a mixed bag, and I'll leave it up to your judgment. Let me know in the comments which of them maybe you use and like, and maybe I did wrong, and also if you think they maybe weren't super useful. That is it for this video. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.